The cold wind of the northern kingdom swept across the stone walls of Eldoria, rattling the banners that hung in the grand hall. Within, the courtiers whispered, their voices a mix of fear and admiration. King Kale, known as the Alpha King, had ruled for over a decade with unmatched strength and intelligence. His presence alone could silence a room, and his enemies had learned that to cross him was to invite ruin. Yet behind the gold and iron mask of authority, Kale carried a secret no one suspected. The weight of a curse that could strip him of everything if he revealed his full power too soon. It was this fear, this quiet unease that led him to take a dangerous and unusual path. Kale disguised himself as a crippled wanderer, a man broken in body and seemingly powerless. No one would recognize the fierce ruler beneath the tattered cloak and hunched shoulders. He walked the streets of his kingdom at night, observing his people, testing their hearts and seeking someone who could see beyond appearances. Someone who would not fear or mock him, but would understand the man behind the facade. Meanwhile, far from the grandeur of the palace, Lady Saris sat in her small, modest chamber. She was an Omega, one of the few who had been quietly rejected by the noble courts. Her family, though noble by birth, had little influence, and her presence was often overlooked. Whispers followed her in every corridor, that she was timid, unworthy, even foolish. But Saris had grown strong in her own way. She had learned to rely on her intelligence, her keen perception, and the steady rhythm of her own heart. She had long given up hope of admiration from the court. Still, in the quiet moments, she dreamed of a life where she could be respected, even loved, for who she truly was. The night Kale chose to visit her, the palace was quiet. Lanterns glowed faintly along the corridors, and shadows danced across the stone floors. Kale entered her chambers under the pretense of seeking shelter from the cold. His gait was slow and unsteady, his cloak pulled tight around his shoulders. When he bowed low before her, he seemed frail, almost fragile. Saris raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. Most visitors would have ignored her, judging her small chamber unworthy of attention. But this man, this crippled stranger, looked at her with eyes that held a strange depth. There was something behind them, a flicker of awareness, a spark that made her heart beat faster. I am in need of rest, he said, his voice quiet and measured. Might I remain here for a night? Saris studied him. She could sense fear and caution in his movements, but also a quiet dignity that did not belong to a simple wanderer. Her instincts whispered that he was more than he appeared. You may stay, she said finally, her voice calm but firm. But only if you respect the rules of my home. He nodded, a faint smile crossing his lips. Of course. As the night deepened, the two sat by the fire. Kyle, careful not to reveal his strength, asked questions about Saris's life, her thoughts, and her dreams. Saris answered honestly, speaking of the court's disdain, of the loneliness that came with being overlooked, and of the secret hope she carried for a life of meaning and respect. You are brave, Kale said softly, almost to himself. Braver than many who claim titles or power. Saris's eyes narrowed slightly. Do not flatter me. I have known fear all my life, and courage is simply the choice to act despite it. Kale nodded. He had not expected such insight, such quiet wisdom, from someone the world had dismissed. In her words, he saw the strength he had longed to find in another, the courage to see beyond appearances and embrace truth. In the days that followed, Kale continued to visit Saris, always in disguise. He watched her navigate small challenges, dealing with a servant's complaint, calming a frightened child of a neighboring noble, or negotiating with merchants who underestimated her intelligence. Each time he found himself more impressed. Saris's strength was subtle but undeniable. built not from power or influence, but from heart, mind, and unwavering integrity. Meanwhile, word of the crippled wanderer spread through the court. Most laughed or sneered at the sight of him. Nobles whispered that he was a charlatan, a beggar seeking favors. But Ceres did not mock him. She treated him with the same respect she afforded any person of courage or insight. Her willingness to see him as more than he appeared stirred something deep within Cale. He had hidden his true self for so long, and yet here was someone who believed in him without knowing the full measure of his power. The court's intrigue grew, and with it, danger. A rival faction within Eldoria sought to expose the crippled stranger, hoping to humiliate anyone foolish enough to associate with him. They could not know that the man they mocked was, in truth, the Alpha King himself. Cale's disguise was his shield, but also a test. He needed to know who would act with honesty and courage, even when it carried risk. One evening, as the moon rose high over the kingdom, Cale knelt before Ceres in her small garden. The flowers were pale in the silver light, and the air was scented with jasmine and frost. "Ceres," he said, his voice careful, "I ask something of you that others would not understand. Will you marry me?" Ceres blinked, taken aback. She had expected no proposals, no displays of interest. Certainly not from someone so mysterious, so frail in appearance. "Marry you?" she asked, her voice a mixture of caution and curiosity. "Why me? Why now?" Cale looked at her, his eyes steady and honest. "Because you see me for who I am. Others fear, ignore, or mock. You do not. You have courage, wisdom, and heart. I need someone who can stand beside me without flinching at what is hidden, someone who will be my equal in every way that matters." Ceres's mind raced. She had been rejected by the court her whole life. She had learned to expect scorn, to keep her thoughts and feelings locked away. Yet here was someone who did not just see her. He valued her. I will marry you," she said finally, her voice soft but resolute. "Not for your title or strength, but because I believe in honesty and courage. I believe in the heart that sees beyond what is shown." Cale's chest tightened, a mixture of relief and admiration. He had found what he sought, a partner unafraid to embrace truth. But even in this quiet moment, the shadows of danger lingered. A servant, hidden among the hedges, had witnessed their conversation. Whispers would soon reach the ears of those who would wish them harm. Cale rose, leaning heavily on his staff. "Tomorrow begins a journey," he said, his voice tinged with both gravity and hope. "A journey of trust, courage, and perhaps love. Are you ready?" Ceres looked up at him, her eyes reflecting both the moonlight and a spark of determination. "I am ready," she said. "Whatever comes, I will not falter." That night, as Kyle slipped into the shadows to return to his true duties, he felt a rare sense of peace. For the first time in many years, he was not alone in his burdens. The path ahead would be dangerous, filled with schemes, tests, and secrets, but he now had someone who could walk it beside him. As the first light of dawn touched the walls of Eldoria, Cale's spy returned to the council, whispering urgently, "The cripple has found an ally. The Omega has agreed to marry him." In the quiet chambers of the palace, Cale allowed himself a brief, almost imperceptible smile. The test had begun, and in the heart of Ceres, a quiet flame burned brighter than she had ever allowed herself to feel. She did not know the full truth of the man she had promised to marry, but she felt, in every fiber of her being, that this choice, rejected by society but embraced by heart, might change the course of both their lives forever. The kingdom slept, unaware that a fragile bond had formed that could challenge curses, defy expectations, and perhaps, in time, unite strength and heart in ways no one had ever imagined. And somewhere in the shadowed halls of Eldoria, the Alpha King smiled beneath his disguise. knowing that the first step towards something extraordinary had been taken. The morning sun rose over Eldoria, casting a soft glow on the stone towers and courtyards. Birds sang in the gardens, and the palace slowly came alive with servants and nobles preparing for the day. Yet beneath the serene surface, the kingdom held its usual tension. Power was a delicate game, and alliances could crumble with a single whisper. Kyle, still in his crippled disguise, moved carefully through the halls. His eyes, sharp and calculating, observed everything: the way courtiers bowed, the sly glances of rivals, the subtle shifts in loyalty. He had learned to trust only what he could see and feel. And he had found a truth that surprised even him. Ceres. She had agreed to marry him despite knowing little of his past or his true identity. Ceres, dressed simply for the day, entered the council chambers. Though she had little rank, her presence now carried weight. The bond she had formed with the crippled stranger gave her a quiet confidence. She walked with a measured grace, her eyes alert to the subtle politics around her. Even the smallest gesture, the smallest hesitation could betray a secret or a lie. "Good morning, Lady Ceres," Cale said softly as he approached. He leaned on his staff, his gait deliberate, the shadow of frailty convincing to all but her. "Are you prepared for today?" "I am," she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "I do not fear what may come. I only act where truth and reason guide me." Kyle studied her, noting the determination in her voice. It was rare to see such poise, such clarity, in someone who had been dismissed by society. She was unyielding, not in pride but in principle, a quality he had long sought in a companion. Their first challenge began that very morning. The palace garden, usually a place of calm and beauty, had become the stage for Cale's test. He had arranged for Ceres to negotiate with a group of merchants who had been asked to supply rare herbs for the palace. These merchants were known for their arrogance and greed. Many courtiers would have flinched, intimidated by the men, but Cale wanted to see Ceres's courage firsthand. "Remember," Cale whispered, "they will try to belittle you. Hold your ground and speak only the truth." Ceres nodded, her hands steady. As she approached the merchants, they immediately laughed at her, sneering at her small stature and humble dress. "Lady Ceres," one merchant said with a smirk, "surely you cannot negotiate terms that matter. Perhaps you should leave such matters to those of higher rank." Ceres's eyes did not waver. "I am tasked with this negotiation," she said clearly. "I expect honesty, and I will not accept deception. Speak your terms, and I will speak mine." The merchant's smirk faltered. He had not anticipated such firmness. With careful words, Ceres guided the conversation, challenging lies and uncovering hidden intentions. Slowly, she turned the negotiation in her favor, securing the rare herbs without compromise. Kyle watched from the shadows, pride warming his chest. The court had dismissed her as weak, but here she had demonstrated cunning, strength, and courage, qualities far more powerful than mere titles. The day continued with subtler tests. Cale arranged for Ceres to walk through the palace corridors at a time when spies from rival factions might watch her. She handled every encounter with grace, deflecting sly questions, reading intentions, and maintaining composure under scrutiny. Every interaction was a measure of her character, her intelligence, and her capacity to stand beside a king, one who was strong yet bound by secrecy. Yet danger lurked beyond the careful tests. In the shadowed corners of the court, a rival noble whispered to his associates. "The cripple will rise in influence," he said with a sneer. "And the Omega who dares to marry him will bring ruin upon herself. We must act before their foolishness strengthens." Cale sensed the growing threat, though Ceres remained unaware of the brewing plots. He could not reveal his true strength yet. The curse would punish him if he acted openly too soon. All he could do was observe, guide, and prepare her for what was coming. That evening, Kyle led Ceres to the palace library, a vast room filled with towering shelves of ancient texts. The flickering candlelight made the shadows dance across the floor, and the air was thick with the scent of parchment and ink. "Knowledge is power," Kale said softly, leaning on his staff, "but wisdom is knowing how to use it. Tonight I will test both." He presented her with a complex puzzle, a set of riddles and codes that had stumped many learned scholars. Ceres studied them carefully, her mind working swiftly to uncover patterns and hidden meanings. Kale watched in quiet amazement. She moved through the challenge not with desperation, but with patience and focus. Hours passed, and Ceres finally solved the puzzle. She looked at Kale, eyes bright with satisfaction. "It was not easy," she admitted, "but persistence and observation reveal what seems impossible at first." Kale nodded, a rare smile touching his lips. "You see truth where others see only confusion. That is the mark of one worthy to stand beside a king." The night deepened, and the castle grew quiet. Ceres had proven her strength, courage, and intelligence, yet both felt the tension of the court's unseen eyes. The bond between them had grown stronger, a mixture of respect, admiration, and the unspoken stirrings of something more. "Kyle," Ceres said quietly, breaking the silence, "I do not fully understand you. You move among the court as a cripple, yet I sense a power and wisdom far beyond what you show. Why hide it?" Kale's eyes darkened, reflecting the candlelight. "Because appearances can be dangerous," he said softly. "A man's strength can invite envy, fear, and betrayal. I needed to see who would walk beside me for the truth, not for my power." Ceres studied him, sensing the weight behind his words. She had been judged her whole life for being different, for being overlooked, and yet here was someone doing the same, hiding himself to test the hearts of those around him. She felt a strange kinship, a silent understanding of shared vulnerability and courage. Their moment was interrupted by a distant sound, a faint rustle in the hallway. Kyle stiffened, listening. "We are not alone," he murmured. "Someone watches us." Ceres's heart quickened, but she remained composed. She had faced challenges all day, and she knew fear alone was not enough to sway her. "Then we watch them in return," she said calmly. Together they moved silently to the window, peering into the moonlit courtyard below. A servant, someone neither recognized, slipped between shadows. Kyle's eyes narrowed. "They are reporting back," he said. "The court will know of this meeting soon." Ceres turned to him, concern in her voice. "Is that dangerous?" Kyle shook his head slowly. "It is a challenge. Every move we make now must be careful. But I trust you, Ceres. You have the courage to face what others fear." As the night deepened, Kale leaned on his staff, his mind weighing the future. Ceres had passed every test so far, yet he knew the court's schemes were only beginning. He could not yet reveal his true identity. But he had found something more precious than any title or power. A companion willing to stand beside him without flinching. Someone who could see the man hidden beneath the cloak and crutch. And in that quiet moment, Ceres felt a strange warmth. She did not know the full truth of the man before her, yet she sensed something extraordinary. The kingdom had rejected her, whispered against her, dismissed her worth. But here, in the quiet shadows of the palace, she had found recognition, respect, and perhaps the first stirrings of something she had never dared to hope for. Love. The next morning, whispers already moved through the palace. Courtiers murmured about the crippled stranger in the Omega who had agreed to marry him. Some laughed, some sneered, others watched with curiosity, sensing that something unusual was unfolding. Kale, leaning on his staff, observed the stir quietly. He knew the days ahead would be more dangerous than the trials of negotiation or riddles. The court would test Cerys, the rivals would strike, and the curse he carried would continue to threaten him. Yet he felt a quiet confidence. With Cerys beside him, he believed they could face what was coming together. As the sun rose over Eldoria, casting golden light over the stone towers, Cale and Cerys prepared to step into the challenges of the day. Neither fully understood what the future held, but both felt the weight of destiny beginning to move. And as they moved through the palace corridors, the silent watchers in the shadows whispered among themselves, "The cripple and the rejected Omega. What game do they play?" Cale's eyes met Cerys's for a brief moment, and in that glance, an unspoken promise passed between them. They would face trials, deceit, and danger together. And in the end, perhaps they would find a bond stronger than fear, a courage greater than betrayal, and a love deeper than the shadows that sought to divide them. The palace doors closed behind them, and the first storm of intrigue, challenge, and destiny began. The palace of Eldoria had grown restless. Whispers crawled through the stone corridors like invisible spiders, twisting rumors into knots of tension. The crippled wanderer and the rejected Omega had become the subject of hushed speculation. Some nobles laughed, calling it a foolish match. Others, quieter and more careful, watched with curiosity, sensing that something greater than appearances was unfolding. Cale, still disguised as the frail wanderer, moved carefully through the halls. Each step was deliberate, every glance measured. He could feel the eyes of the court upon him, some filled with contempt, some with suspicion. But beneath the surface, the real threat was invisible. A rival alpha, Lord Varin, who had long coveted the throne. Varin would see Cale's disguise broken and use it to strike both him and Cerys down. Cerys, now more confident and assured, moved beside Cale as they walked through the palace gardens. The morning air was crisp, scented with frost and the lingering perfume of night-blooming flowers. She had become adept at reading people, noticing subtle gestures and whispered intentions. Yet even she could not fully grasp the danger lurking in the shadows. "Kyle," she said softly, glancing at him. "The whispers grow louder. I feel it. Someone seeks to harm us." Kyle's gaze narrowed. "You are right. Lord Varin is preparing a challenge. He will attempt to expose me, to humiliate you, and to claim advantage over the throne. We must remain careful." Cerys's expression did not falter. "Then we must act with caution, but also with courage. Fear will not protect us, only wisdom and unity." Kyle felt a surge of admiration. She had already passed tests of strength, intelligence, and patience, but now she was proving resilience under threat. Her spirit shone brighter than any jewel in the palace. Their first encounter with Varin came unexpectedly. During a council meeting, the noble's eyes glinted with malice. "Your Grace," he said, addressing Cale in his disguised form, "I hear rumors that a fragile wanderer has gained influence in the palace, and worse, that an Omega of low standing has agreed to marry him. Surely such folly cannot be ignored." The room fell silent. Courtiers exchanged uneasy glances. Cerys, standing beside Cale, did not flinch. "It is no folly," she said firmly. "The value of a person is measured not by strength or status alone, but by courage, wisdom, and heart. Those who refuse to see this are blind to truth." A ripple of surprise moved through the council. Varin's smirk faltered, replaced by a shadow of anger. He had expected Cerys to hesitate, to shrink under scrutiny. Instead, she had challenged him openly, and the force of her conviction struck harder than any argument. Kyle studied her silently, feeling a rare warmth. She was not merely brave. She was unwavering. And yet, he knew the danger was far from over. Varin would not accept defeat so easily. That night, Kale led Saris to a secluded courtyard, lit by the pale glow of lanterns. The moon hung low, casting long shadows across the cobblestones. He wanted to speak with her alone, away from the court's watchful eyes. "Saris," he said, his voice quiet. "The trials are only beginning. Lord Varen will continue to test us, and soon the true danger will appear." Saris looked at him, a mixture of concern and determination in her eyes. "Then we face it together," she said. "I will not falter, Kyle. Not now, not ever." Kyle's hand hovered near his staff, though he did not need it for support in private. "There is something you must know," he said cautiously. "The cripple you see before you is not who I truly am. I am the Alpha King Kale, ruler of Eldoria. I hid my strength to find someone who would see me for myself, not for my power." Saris blinked, absorbing the revelation. Her mind raced. The man she had agreed to marry, the one she had come to respect and trust, was not a wanderer at all, but the very ruler she had heard about in fearful whispers. You are the king?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kale nodded. "Yes, and now you understand why the challenges were necessary. I could not risk showing my true self too soon. The curse I carry is dangerous, and those who would betray me wait for any sign of weakness. I needed to see who would stand with me regardless." Saris felt a mixture of awe and trepidation. She had trusted the man she thought weak, and now that trust was tested in an entirely new way. Yet in her heart, she realized that her respect and admiration had never been for appearances alone. They were for the man himself, and for the courage he had shown in testing her as well. "I see you," she said softly. "Not for what you are expected to be, but for who you truly are. And I choose to stand with you, Kale, whatever comes." A faint smile crossed Kale's face. "Your choice honors me more than words can convey." But their quiet moment was interrupted by a commotion near the outer gates. Shadowy figures slipped through the palace walls, assassins sent by Lord Varen, taking advantage of the moonless night. Kyle's eyes darkened, the alpha within him surfacing despite the disguise. "Stay close," he ordered. "Do not speak unless I command it." Saris nodded, moving swiftly at his side. Though untrained in combat, she had learned to trust her instincts and Kyle's guidance. Together they navigated the twisting paths of the palace garden, evading the attackers. Kale's staff moved with precision, striking only where necessary, disabling the intruders without unnecessary harm. His movements, though seemingly frail, held a controlled power that left the assassins stunned. Saris followed his lead, using agility and quick thinking to block paths and prevent traps. When the final shadow fell, Kyle and Saris stood alone, breathing heavily. The moon broke through the clouds, casting silver light on the courtyard. "You see," Kale said quietly, "the danger we face is real. The court and the curse are not idle threats. We must be vigilant, and we must trust each other completely." Saris looked at him, her heart pounding but her resolve firm. "Then we will face it, together. No matter what Varen or anyone else does, I will not leave your side." Kale studied her, realizing that her words were more than loyalty. They were courage, conviction, and love in its quietest, strongest form. He had hidden his true self for years, fearing betrayal, fearing the curse, fearing that no one could see him as he was. And now, standing beside Saris, he felt the stirrings of hope. Perhaps with her, he could overcome both curse and court intrigue. The next morning, the palace buzzed with whispers of the night's events. Varen's plot had failed, though no one knew who had foiled it. Kyle and Saris moved among the courtiers, appearing calm, collected, and unshaken. But each step carried tension. The rival alpha would not stop, He would strike again, testing both Cale's disguise and Saris's courage. Cale took her hand briefly, a silent reassurance. "The court will continue its schemes, and danger will come," he said. "But together, we are stronger than they imagine. Remember, Saris, strength is not measured only by might, but by courage, wisdom, and heart. You have all three." Saris squeezed his hand, a quiet smile on her face. "Then let them come. We will not falter." Even as the palace walls shone in the morning light, the shadow of prophecy and rivalry loomed. Lord Varen's ambitions grew bolder, and the curse Cale carried threatened to strike at the most vulnerable moment. Yet within the quiet bond forming between Cale and Saris, a spark of hope burned, one that could illuminate even the darkest corridors of Eldoria. As they walked through the gardens, side by side, Cale realized something profound. He had hidden himself to find loyalty, courage, and trust, and in Saris, he had found all three, and more. She had chosen him without knowing the full measure of his power, and that choice had changed him. And Saris, for her part, understood that the man she had agreed to marry was not just the crippled wanderer of the night, but the Alpha King himself. Yet her respect, admiration, and growing affection remained. For she had seen the heart beneath the disguise, and in that heart she found a reflection of her own courage. The palace, quiet once more, held its secrets, but Kyle and Saris knew that their path was no longer solitary. Together they faced the trials of court, the schemes of rivals, and the looming threat of the curse. And in that shared resolve, they discovered a bond stronger than fear, more enduring than whispers, and deeper than any test the world could set before them. But the night was far from over. From the shadows, eyes watched, calculating, waiting. Lord Varen's patience was not infinite, and the next challenge, one that could expose Cale's true identity and put Saris in peril, was already being set in motion. The wind whispered through the palace trees, carrying a message only the careful could hear. The Alpha walks among the weak, but soon the truth will be revealed, and no bond can hide him from destiny. Cale's eyes met Saris's, a silent understanding passing between them. Whatever was coming, they would face it together. The kingdom of Eldoria had never felt so tense. Rumors of the crippled wanderer's true identity now circled the palace like a storm, carried on whispers, curious glances, and secret letters. Lord Varen's ambition had grown bolder with each passing day. He had discovered that the Omega, Saris, was not only brave but clever and determined, and he knew that to strike Cale, he must first break her. Cale and Saris walked through the palace gardens, their hands briefly brushing. The moonlight painted silver paths across the frost-covered grass, and the night air carried both the scent of winter and the subtle thrill of danger. Kyle's mind was heavy with thought. The curse he carried had remained dormant while Saris was near, yet he knew it would strike if he faltered. "Saris," Kyle said quietly, "the time has come. Lord Varen will make his move tonight. He seeks to humiliate you, to expose me, and to claim the throne. We cannot let him succeed." Saris's eyes, bright with determination, met his. "Then we face it together," she said firmly. "I will not run, and I will not falter. Whatever he plans, he underestimates us." Kyle allowed himself a rare moment of warmth. Her courage was steady, like a flame that refused to be extinguished. He realized, once again, that strength was not his alone. Together they were stronger than any scheme, any curse, any danger. As night fell, the palace corridors grew quiet. Courtiers had retired, leaving only shadows and the occasional creak of stone beneath careful footsteps. Kyle and Saris moved silently toward the throne room, the heart of power in Eldoria. This was where Lord Varen planned to strike, using the council's gathering as cover. They arrived to find the doors partially open. Voices carried through the dim hall. Varen, confident and sneering, outlining his accusation that the crippled stranger was a fraud and that Saris had been deceived. "Do you not see?" he said, his voice rich with contempt. "This Omega believes she marries a weak, helpless man, yet he walks among you as a shadow. The truth will soon be known." Saris stepped forward, her posture firm and unshaken. "You are wrong," she said clearly. "The man I choose to marry is not defined by what others see. He is honest, courageous, and wise, and I stand by him." A ripple of shock passed through the council. Nobles murmured, some doubting their own eyes. How could a lowly Omega confront such arrogance and stand unshaken? Kyle, leaning on his staff, spoke next. His voice was measured, but with a power that filled the hall. "I am Kale, king of Eldoria. The cripple you see is a disguise, a measure I took to find one who would see me for myself, not for my power. Saris has proven that she is worthy, not of my title but of my trust, respect, and heart." A stunned silence followed. Varen's face twisted with rage, realizing his plan had failed. He had counted on mockery, deceit, and fear, but Saris's courage and Kale's reveal had turned the court against him. You cannot be serious," Varen hissed. "A lowly Omega beside the king?" Saris stepped forward, her voice unwavering. "I am the Omega you mock, yes, but my courage, intelligence, and heart are greater than any title you wield. Your power is hollow, Varen. It relies on fear, lies, and weakness disguised as strength. We do not need such deceit to stand." Kyle allowed himself a small smile. Saris's words carried the authority of truth, and in that, he found the power to confront the rival without harming him unnecessarily. The court's eyes turned toward Varen, who faltered under the scrutiny, his confidence cracking. The night was far from over. As Varen glared, the air shifted, and a faint shimmer of dark energy surrounded the throne. The curse that Kale carried, ancient and unforgiving, began to stir. He felt it pressing, a force threatening to strike at the very moment his attention was divided. "Saris," he whispered, "the curse stirs. Stay close to me and trust yourself. Courage alone will not be enough. Wisdom and heart must guide you." Saris nodded, her hand brushing against his. "I am with you," she said softly. "Do not fear what comes. We face it together." With deliberate motion, Kale removed his staff and allowed the alpha within to emerge. Light and power flowed through him, not for destruction but for defense. He could feel the curse testing him, probing for weakness. But Saris's steady presence strengthened him, anchoring his heart and mind. Varen, sensing a loss of control, lunged forward with a sword, hoping to seize advantage. Kale moved swiftly, not with cruelty, but with precision, disarming the man and subduing him. The court gasped as Kale's true strength became visible, yet Saris remained calm, her faith in him unshaken. "Do you see now?" Kale said, his voice steady. "Strength alone does not make a ruler. Trust, courage, and integrity shape the heart that governs, and Saris embodies these qualities more than any who stand in this hall." The curse, sensing Kale's resolve and Saris's loyalty, began to weaken. The dark shimmer receded, leaving only the sense of a test completed. Kyle exhaled, feeling the weight lift from his shoulders, at least for a moment. The court was silent, some in awe, others in disbelief. Varen was taken into custody, his schemes exposed, his influence shattered. Kale turned to Saris, gratitude and admiration reflected in his eyes. "You have done more than stand beside me," Kale said softly. "You have faced fear, challenge, and deceit, and emerged stronger. You have lifted the curse with the courage of your heart. I owe you more than words can express." Saris, her chest rising and falling with controlled breaths, smiled faintly. "It was never about owing," she said. "It was about standing for what is right, even when the world doubts you. I do not need reward for that, only the knowledge that truth and courage endure." Kyle reached for her hand, lifting it gently. "Then let us endure together," he said. "The kingdom may still face trials, but I know now that with you by my side, no darkness can truly prevail." As the first light of dawn broke over Eldoria, the palace walls glowed in warm gold. Cale and Saris stood together on the balcony, looking out over the city. The streets were alive with whispers, not of mockery but of wonder. The people had seen the strength of heart and courage triumph over deceit and fear. "Do you feel it?" Saris asked quietly. "The kingdom is watching us. They do not yet understand what we have faced." Kyle nodded. "They will understand in time. What matters now is not their understanding, but the bond we share, trust, courage, and heart. These will guide us, and they will guide Eldoria." Saris leaned slightly into him, a gesture of both comfort and connection. "Then we begin anew," she said softly. "Together, Kyle. No matter what comes, we face it as one." Kyle felt a rare, deep warmth in his chest, a quiet contentment that had eluded him for years. The curse had tested him, the court had challenged him, and the rival Alpha had threatened him. Yet, through it all, Saris had remained steadfast. She had seen him as he truly was, and in doing so, had changed the course of their lives. The wind stirred, carrying a hint of jasmine and frost across the balcony. It seemed to whisper promises of new beginnings, of challenges yet to come, and of a bond unbroken by fear or deceit. Kyle took a deep breath, feeling the full measure of his power and responsibility. But more importantly, he felt the measure of trust, courage, and love, the qualities that Saris had brought into his life. Together, they had turned fear into strength, isolation into connection, and uncertainty into hope. The kingdom of Eldoria would face many more trials, but Cale knew one truth above all. With Saris by his side, he was no longer alone. And Saris, for her part, understood that she had not only found a partner, but a kindred spirit, a heart that matched her own in courage, wisdom, and depth. The dawn broke fully, painting the palace in brilliant light. For the first time in years, Cale and Saris allowed themselves to breathe freely, knowing they had overcome the first greatest challenge. And as they stood together hand in hand, the winds of Eldoria carried a quiet, almost imperceptible whisper. The Alpha and the Omega have chosen each other, and the kingdom will never be the same. In that moment, amidst the rising sun and the soft rustle of leaves, Kyle and Saris understood the truth of their bond. It was not built on appearances, on titles, or on fear. It was built on trust, courage, and a love that had been forged through trials, shadow, and the quiet strength of two hearts willing to face the world together. The kingdom was watching, the rivals were defeated, for now, and the curse, ancient and relentless, had met its match in the courage of one Omega and the humility of one Alpha King. Cale turned to Saris, eyes filled with warmth. "We begin the next chapter, together," he said. Saris nodded, her hand still in his. "Together," she echoed. And so, beneath the light of a new day, the Alpha King and his chosen Omega stepped forward, ready to face whatever destiny might hold, side by side, hearts bound by courage, trust, and love.